Welcome to Tenacity with Sonia C, the podcast where we dive into stories behind success, uncovering lessons learned and the insights gained by leaders and innovators in the business world. I'm your host, Sonia, and let's get started. My guest today is Aaron Trahan. Aaron has spent over 15 years in executive roles across various sectors, mastering the art of leadership and innovation. But he didn't stop there. He left the corporate world to focus on his true passion, helping others unlock their full potential through performance coaching and professional speaking. Today, Aaron is here to share his insights on cultivating a performance mindset and how it can transform your personal and professional life. Hi, Aaron. How are you today?
I'm great, Sonia. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, me too. I went through your bio and I was trying to figure out what to focus on, but I finally came up with something, so I'm excited
Oh,
to have
great.
a conversation. Yeah. So let's dive right in.
Sure.
So Aaron, after over 15 years in executive roles across various sectors, you decided to leave that life and focus solely on unleashing human potential through performance coaching and professional speaking. What led you to make that decision?
Yeah, it's an interesting question to start off with, and one that's kind of at the core. It was really a big pivot in my career. I was able to take on leadership responsibilities and a leadership role very early into my corporate career. But I eventually reached a point to where while I had a lot of success, I rose very quickly. I think we all kind of hit that point where we know what got us to this point is not going to get us to the next point.
Yeah.
So that required a little soul searching on my part. Had to have some tough conversations with that person looking back at me in the mirror. And I needed to kind of stop avoiding those development areas, those things that are weaknesses for me. And if I really wanted to grow further, and what I realized to be my greatest development area at that time was just simply being an effective leader. We don't come out of college knowing how to lead people and lead teams and lead complex organizations. So I made it a point to convert that weakness into a superpower. I wanted and was committed to becoming a world-class leader from that point forward. And it was an interesting journey for me. It kind of what started out as a development initiative kind of emerged into a passion and really what filled me with purpose and not focusing on me and instead focusing on the we was really where I developed an interest, a passion, and then developed my talent and skills in that area to help other people get better, to help remove the obstacles that others were facing, to be a springboard to help people make that jump from good to great. And so, yeah, that's what led me to launching my firm and having the luxury of being able to do this full time now.
Nice. I like that. So, considering your extensive experience in optimizing human performance, how do you define a performance mindset? What are the core components that distinguish it from other types of mindsets?
Yeah. I'll first start by talking about the more mainstream definition of mindset, which everyone's heard now as growth mindset. And really, as I was kind of looking into that, I noticed in all of my speaking and presentations, I always ask every room, who in here identifies with a growth mindset? And without fail, 70 to 80% of hands in the room go up, saying, yep, that's me. I like growth. I have a growth mindset. And while it's easy to have the beliefs and the thoughts that, with the proper amount of time, energy, and effort, you can build your abilities, you can develop your new skills, you can grow your intelligence. But I started to realize something. And when we dug below the surface and really examined the behaviors, the routines, the approach of those that said, I have a growth mindset, I kept coming back to something was missing.
Mm.
They're saying the right things. I do, in fact, believe they're believing all the right things. You go to their LinkedIn profiles, and I'm sure they're posting all the right things. But there was a lack of energy being put behind those beliefs that was actually driving their growth and development. And so when I think about the difference between a growth mindset and a performance mindset, it really can be distilled down to one simple yet very critical difference, and that's a bias for action. And what those with a performance mindset do that the growth mindset group doesn't is they don't let the fear of failure slow them down. They don't let the risk of uncertainty stop them. They are going to take action. They're constantly in the search of finding out how much more they're capable of. They're committed to continuous improvement. And another key attribute is they're okay with being comfortable getting uncomfortable because they know the greatest growth will always be unlocked when we venture to the outer edges of our current capabilities, when we're challenged and stretched the most. That's when our best comes out. And so what that performance mindset group does is they're constantly searching for their next best version. They stay away from the comfort zone and being comfortable and, just being content with the status quo. They're always in a mode of kind of elevating themselves and growing.
Mm-hmm. So talking about action, this was further down in my list, but thinking and believing you can take something so far, taking action is where the magic happens, which is something
Right.
you said. What causes someone not to take action, and how do you help professionals leave that place so they can start taking action?
Yeah, I think it starts at a very foundational level. I like to think about reimagining
Mm-hmm.
how we're defining failure.
Okay.
And so much of what causes inaction is kind of the uncertainty of the unknown, the risk that there could be failure. Especially as we become more successful, we almost become more risk averse. Like we're successful. We want people to view us as successful. We're looking at things now to not make mistakes, not seem like a beginner. Said more boldly, we're afraid to suck at new things, right? We want to be seen as the experts. And I think that prevents so much action from being taken. So back to how I want to answer this question is imagine how differently your life would be if instead of defining failure as not achieving or coming up short or, not accomplishing, what if instead failure was now defined as not trying?
Mm.
What if failure now became not taking action? And at least
Oh,
seeing what we learn on the other side of that, I think a lot of lives across the world would be lived very, very differently. Um, and I think that the bad habit I think we all fall into is that craving we have for safety. It's like we want the guarantee. If we're looking at investments, we want the sure thing. How many times have you heard, I'm waiting for the right time. I'm waiting for the perfect moment. In reality, that's you'll be chasing a ghost, right? There is no perfect moment. There is no right time. And so how I help leaders get more comfortable with taking action is avoid any type of expectation of perfect action and start thinking about everything as imperfect action. Everything we do to some degree is imperfect.
yeah.
But when we take those imperfect actions, it then allows us to grow our competence in any area, which then builds our confidence, which then allows us to take more imperfect action. So it's really starting the momentum of that flywheel of imperfect action, growth in competence, which then elevates our confidence, that then comes back around to help us take more action.
So I'm going to use myself as an example.
Yeah,
You
let's do
think,
it.
okay, do you think fear has something to do with it? And even things like social media, which now exposes you to the world. So I'll give you an example. My marketing team has been on me to create content.
Mhm.
We're now in a space where, I've created this podcast and we're bringing on people, and they're like, "Well, you need to do more. We need, we're trying to build a brand, and you need to." you're speaking at events, but you need to start creating content around like thought leadership. And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do it. And they put together a whole plan and topics I need to like talk about and create content for. But my fear is like now I gotta like put myself out there and people are gonna see me and people are gonna judge me. And what if somebody makes a comment that I don't like or I can't handle? Is that gonna like make me depressed or affect me in some way? So do you find that that's a common thing that happens?
Absolutely. And most especially in the area that you're talking about. And putting ourselves out there is exactly what we're talking about. It's
Yeah.
the fear of being judged. It's the fear of being criticized. It's the fear of being made fun of, maybe.
Hmm.
And because we so closely associate these type of activities back to our core identity.
Yeah.
And what I say is, hey, what if you put a piece of content out there and it bombs? It doesn't do what you want it to do. And guess what? There is so much learning and experience and wisdom that's going to come on the other side of that that you would have never learned if you just didn't do anything. And so the fact of the matter is, while you may fail, let's not discount that.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with your identity, right? It's like this particular activity or this particular function may fail or not work out the way that you wanted it to. I would almost flip the script and say, good, because we're going to learn so much from that we're going to be able to come back the very next time and do it better. And I think fear, and I got to give credit to Alex Hormozy, is where I kind of first heard this, is fear has a way of painting itself to be this vast ocean that sits out in front of us, right? But the
Yeah.
second that we take action, we realize something, that ocean may in fact be a mile wide, but it's only an inch deep. We're not going to drown. It's just that sensation that we have of the unknown, of being judged, of being criticized. And there will never be a substitute for taking action to demonstrate your most authentic self. No matter how uncomfortable it is in the short term and at the beginning, I think you're going to have a very different sensation on the other side of taking those actions that
Hmm.
will build your confidence, that will build your confidence. And then you're going to find yourself almost willing and wanting to take more action.
Okay, yeah, I like that. I think I can relate to that a little bit since I use myself as an example. Like when I
Mhm.
on this journey to start the podcast, I wanted to give back to the entrepreneur and founders community that I had been part of for many years and that I'm really passionate about. And I always struggled, getting the information I wanted, finding mentors. So I said, I'm going to start this to give back so people can learn from the people that have already been there and done it. But I remember I reached a point where it was like, it's never going to be perfect. I'm never going to be ready. And I just started doing it. I think my first episode was probably really crappy. And the second one
Mhm.
probably wasn't as great. But every time I do a new one, I get better and better at it. But it was really about just saying, just do it. It's not going to be perfect, but just start, even if you're not
Yes.
ready. Because once you start and you establish something, now you have to keep going because now you're going to look like an idiot if you don't keep going, right?
Yeah, and there's two things that I think we can add to that is one, if we look at fear and the anxiety and kind of the overwhelm that comes with it, if we were to chart that out,
Hmm.
where you're going to see the peak, where that fear is going to be at its highest, the peak fear index is always going to be right before we take action. That's just the comfort zone inside of us screaming at us, right? The comfort zone wants you to be comfortable. It wants you to feel safe. It wants you to feel everything stable. But that same voice that's telling you that will never admit to you that no growth lives in that space, right? So the fear is always going to peak right
Yeah.
before you take action. And that's when you realize that the mirage of that ocean, hell, it's only an inch deep. I can walk all the way across it. No problem. And then I think two, to kind of what you just said, it's all about perspective. And I kind of like to think about this as a scoreboard, right? And I'm not naive. I know we're in the middle of 2024. Social media is everywhere.
Yeah.
It's so easy for us to compare ourselves against any number of images, stories, personalities that's out there. But if we think about a scoreboard, and we're always going to compare, it's human nature. There's always going to be us against some benchmark we're striving to. The challenge that I would issue to you would be make sure the other score on that scoreboard is nothing external. Make it internal. So if the Sonia today is competing against the Sonia from yesterday, you can always win. And if you're just continuing to get better, that 1% better every single day, nobody can take that away from you. And you're building the evidence over time that you're going to eventually see that when you look back, if you continue to do that week after week after week after week, a year from now, you're going to look back to this conversation today and say, excuse my language, but holy shit, I'm almost unrecognizable from
Yeah.
where I was back then. And yeah, don't compare Sonia's episode 1 to Tim Ferriss's episode 750, right? Because guess what? Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss, everybody who has a master, podcast,
Yeah.
they all sucked at episode 1.
That's true. That's very true.
So yeah, that would be the message there. And so the question that I would ask you, I know you're supposed to be the one asking questions, but those things that are making up that uncomfort, that fear, I would just challenge yourself, pick one of those things and make sure you do it over the next 7 days. And just keep doing that. Just keep showing up and identify one thing that you've been avoiding, procrastinating, not doing because of all these feelings. Just commit to doing one thing. And I think if you keep doing that week after week, you're going to feel like a different person on the other side of taking those actions. I assure you.
Wow, I love that. Okay, I'm going to try it.
Yeah. Let's tell the audience what's going to be that one thing you're going to do next week.
Yeah, I'm going to create the content that I need to.
Ooh,
I'm gonna create a whole week's worth and I'm gonna put it out there and I'm just gonna do it.
I have a feeling somewhere in the background, your marketing team is probably like high-fiving each other right now.
Yeah, very much so. They've been on
Yeah.
me. So, I read this when I was putting this together that you had mentioned, and you said there's surveys indicating that leaders often utilize only 40% of their potential at work. In your view, what are the most common barriers that prevent individuals from reaching their full potential, aside from fear?
Yeah, yeah, and I think it shows up on the other side of the spectrum. And I would let your audience know that I'm speaking about this from personal experience.
Mhm.
At first, when I read that survey that asked mid-level and senior level leaders, and this was a global survey, what percent of your full potential are you expressing in your day-to-day leadership role? When I saw the average statistics of around 30 and 40%, I intuitively kind of felt that that's pretty low. Like, surely it's got to be more than that. But then as I look back at a period of my own executive career, like it hit me. I was that statistic. There was a period of time where I was only showing up, probably even less than that. And it actually wasn't fear. It was on the other side. And it's this simple rule that is undefeated, and that is success will always breed complacency.
Oh.
And the challenge that I would give to the audience and those members listening would be, don't think that you're the exception. Like, it's going to happen. On the other side of success, complacency, who's been lurking in the shadows, will try to show up at your front doorstep and find its way in. You hear championship teams cite all the time that it's far more difficult to repeat as champions than it was to win the first time. Companies say the same thing.
Yeah.
Wildly more difficult to maintain and sustain number one market share and industry dominance than it was when they were the underdogs, kind of just trying to knock off the number one. And so this is a a rule that applies to life, business, sports. And so we just have to be ready for it. We've got to set the expectations and be prepared and know that complacency will always be the thing that shows up after we achieve success. And it's that voice telling us, like, we can take it easy now. Look at what you've achieved. Play it safe. Stop and smell the roses. But it won't say the second that you start doing that, you're going to stop growing. And that is what leads so many leaders to kind of get in this nice cruise control comfort zone. And you wake up and realize, I'm not playing anywhere close to my highest potential and my highest game. And so, yeah, that was a big realization for me, that going from that feels low to, oh man, I was part of that statistic at one point in time.
So, in your line of work, what's the most common challenge you've seen leaders struggle to overcome?
Yeah, I think it's this one. I'd like to kind of double down on this one, because I think it's such a big challenge. I think I talk to a lot of great sales leaders, but the one thing that I tell them all the time is the best salesperson on the planet is that voice coming from inside the comfort zone.
Mm,
Um, it's so easy to adapt to our environments. It's so easy to just adopt status quo as kind of like, yeah, let's continue to kind of maintain here. But the one thing that I always want people to walk away with is that growth and comfort will never coexist. You have to choose. You
mm,
can't have both. And
yeah.
so if you're going to be comfortable, you're going to stop growing. And if you're going to choose growth, you have to know that by design, it's not meant to be comfortable. You're going to be stretched. You're going to be challenged. And so when you can properly do that arithmetic and just be understanding that if I'm too comfortable, there's just no way I'm going to be growing. To
Mm,
grow is to accept that you're going to have to give up a little bit of comfort. And
yeah.
that's the thing that for a lot of leaders, after they have the title, they've got the status, there's money flowing in, it's, will you be prepared to take on the battle of complacency, to stay in growth mode, to continue to look at that scoreboard that we mentioned earlier of realizing I'm competing against myself from yesterday, from last week, from last month. And will I commit to continuous improvement?
Yeah.
Will I commit to continuing to take in the feedback that may not make me feel warm and fuzzy inside, but I know that I need to hear, that will help me get better, that will help me improve? That's the biggest challenge that I see leaders having, is being ready for that battle against complacency.
Do you think ego has something to do with it, where you reach a point and you think, you've achieved some success, and now your ego is sort of telling you you don't need to learn anymore. You should be teaching others.
Yeah. You just touched on a massive topic, and it is all about ego, right? It's when we reach those points in our career, we kind of develop that tendency to only listen to the things we want to hear, and we don't listen enough to the things that we need to hear, right? And being the smartest one in the room has a terrible return on investment. There
Yeah.
is upside, there's massive downside. And yeah, so I think it's they go hand in hand. That's the battle you're fighting. So for you to be effective at winning the battle against complacency, you have to. This is not a maybe or just sometimes. It's a key dependency that you have to check that ego at the door. You have to keep looking for ways to get better. In the ego, it's it's a pretty interesting animal. It's always going to be that thing that tells you that you're great. You've arrived. You've made it. You've got it all figured out. And when you start listening to that too much, you'll stop growing. You're no longer coachable. You're not going to strive for continuous improvement. Um, so yeah, I think checking the ego at the door is a must if you're going to continue to beat the battle against complacency.
Okay. Can you provide an example of a success story where you implemented your performance mindset operating system significantly transformed a leader's professional um, uh, trajectory?
Yeah. Yeah. I've got a leader that I'm working with right now. And, it's just he's extremely talented, extremely high earning. And he made the commitment that he didn't want to stay there, right? He was almost realizing without me telling him, the reason that we started working together was because he was afraid of this would be the top, this would be the peak. And so we've implemented a lot of different things. And one of them was we did a 360 leadership assessment where I had him, and this is pretty common, but I can't recommend this highly enough, is to find somebody that can help you execute a leadership assessment where he provided me 5 or 6 stakeholders from his personal life, from his professional life that I got to speak to, collect the feedback. I had him go through a rating system where he rated himself in a couple of areas, and then I aggregated the ratings of what everybody else gave him. And there were some gaps. We all have a tendency to rate and evaluate ourselves higher than what others would. But if you don't really sit down and commit yourself to doing that work to get better, these are all the things that's so easy to ignore. It's easy to not get the hard feedback. It's easy to leave the unknowns unknown. So the work that I'm doing with this individual it's been transformational. It's been remarkable. He's now growing at a faster rate than he ever has before because we put in the mechanisms, we put in the reflection points, we put in the feedback loops that can always send signals to him on where are the areas to improve, where do you think you're better than you actually are being graded by your peers, and what action steps can we take to closing that gap. And I think by having that type of a coachable attitude, by being willing to listen to the things that you need to hear, not just the things that you want to hear, I don't know where his ceiling is. He kind of felt before we started working together that he kind of reached a ceiling he never even thought was possible before, and he didn't even have a vision to go beyond that. Now we've jacked the ceiling so far higher that I don't know where it's going to stop. I don't know what he's going to achieve because there's that much potential we're unlocking almost on a weekly basis.
So, how can someone overcome their own limiting beliefs?
I think the first thing is to be aware of them, right? You can't change something you're not aware of. And so I think to run head into them, identify your limiting beliefs. Don't let them stay trapped in your head. Get them out, get them on paper. And then when you have these limiting beliefs identified, they're on paper, you now have one job: prove yourself wrong with evidence. And so if you think that you have a weakness here, what evidence can you stack on top of that to where it becomes a no-brainer? You almost laugh at that limiting belief because you're creating so much proof and so much evidence on this other side where it almost becomes comical. And if you don't have the awareness first, you get it out, get it documented. And that almost becomes, put that on your scoreboard, right? If that's the scoreboard from yesterday, I had this limiting belief, what are going to be the points, the proof, the evidence that completely contradicts this limiting belief to where you can turn something from even a debate, whether this is fact or not, where you can stack so much evidence on it to where it's like, that's clearly fiction. I've just proved myself wrong with proof. Don't even have the debate in your mind. Shift all your focus to generating proof that that limiting belief is just some fictional story that happens to be floating by.
Yeah.
But don't look for a shortcut. Go and find the proof, manufacture the proof, create the proof. That'll be the one way to not only bring those limiting beliefs down, but your goal should be to kill them. So if that limiting belief is out floating around, know that proof that it's false will be the thing that kills it for good, because that proof is always something you can come back and point to. It's tangible. You can almost hold it in your hand.
So before we wrap up, I have one last question.
Yeah.
So I read this also on your bio, and it said Henry Ford said, "Whether you think you can or think you can't, you'll always be right." So I
Mm,
want to touch on this because we've been talking about mindset, and of course we have to talk about where we are today in society and social media. And I just wanted to go into maybe the younger generation a little bit. So there's this whole thing on social media and coaches out there that are like, I'll take you from zero to six figures in 6 months. And you see all these, young kids driving fancy, expensive cars. And I feel like the whole coaching community and mindset and believe it and you will get it is all focused on having things, buying
mhm.
things, having money in the bank. How do you turn that off and focus on sustainable growth over time and not just going from zero to this amount in such a short period of time? And if you do go in that short period of time, is that sustainable, right? So,
Right.
question to you, there's a whole bunch of questions in one, but
Yeah. No, I know exactly where to take that one. It's like, don't believe anybody that tells you they're going to take you from here to here. Because think about the underlying psychology of that is I can't do it. I need somebody to do it for me. If that's going to be the underlying belief, you'll never get there. Back to that Henry Ford quote, you're almost believing you can't, so you need someone else to do it. Nobody can take you there. No one's coming to save you. You have to commit to it. A great coach can absolutely accelerate your path, can help that transition and transformation be a hell of a lot easier than it would be on your own. But a coach isn't going to do it for you. That's You have to be the one to commit. And I think what Henry Ford said, even way back when, over 100 years ago, is he knew the power that a mindset can have to fueling you to achieve the extraordinary. Look, our thoughts are a double-edged sword. It can be the thing that takes us to new levels, but it's the very same thing that can hold us back. So I
yeah.
think to start with, you have to be the one that chooses that path. You're going to have to be the one to do the work. You're going to have to be the one to do the action. Yes, I agree. There's others out there. I kind of put myself in that bucket. I can make that journey a lot more enjoyable and get you there faster, but I'm not going to be the one to get you there. And when you're looking at those comparisons around what that next level is, where do I want to go? I'll give your audience a tool that I use with my clients, and it's called the Success Happiness Alignment Tool. And it's just three simple questions. First, write down and get very clear on what your definition for success is for yourself. Not what's going to look good on your Instagram feed, not what you're driving. Really understand and almost make it an elevator pitch in 3 sentences or less. Tell me what success is being defined for yourself. I think that's the starting point. Two is do the same thing for happiness. What does happiness look like for you? Really zoom out. Like, what's the ideal state? What does your perfect day look like? What are you doing? Who are you surrounded by? What does pure joy look like?
Mm.
And then third is the calibration question. Based on your responses of how you're defining success for yourself and what happiness looks like, do they align or are they in conflict with one another? And you will be surprised that by how many people, by the way they're defining success, they think that once they reach this certain point, happiness will then just show up at the end, and they're giving up all of the things that they're defining as happiness to chase that success.
Mm.
The bad news is you'll never get there. If you're not happy on the way, on the journey, you're not going to be happy at the destination, right? And so you need to really define what those two things are and then do the arithmetic. Can I have both at the same time? Because if I don't and they conflict with each other, I assure you, whatever you're striving to, and if you're giving up all of the happiness to get there,
Mm.
you're going to find yourself in a situation where winning doesn't feel like winning. And then you're going to use hindsight to kick yourself saying, I gave up too much to get to where I'm at. The
Yeah.
bill that becomes due once you get there is a much bigger bill than you want, and you wish you could go back and do it all differently. So that would be my suggestion on how to reconcile that approach.
Yeah. So what can someone expect from a coach like you?
Yeah, I think all coaches are different. They come in many different shapes and sizes. I can speak for myself, and here's the value that I give to clients. And I'll first start with the problem. Here's the problem and the challenge that I solve for. And I see this show up with every single leader that I engage with, whether they're a client or not. They know they could be better at prioritization. So if you're focused on 20 different things, nothing is a priority. What are the 2 or 3 things that are the top priorities to what you want to achieve in the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months? Second is focus. They all feel like their focus is everywhere. They don't have enough time to focus on the things that matter the most. There's too much focus going on things that aren't priorities, and there's never enough left over for the things that are most important. And then accountability. They lack the accountability, which then allows them to have a bunch of different priorities and a bunch of different focus. And so I help solve those problems by working with leaders to identify, stress test, and put in place the right priorities. We 10x their focus on those few priorities and help them say no or not yet to everything else. And then I help with accountability. We track, measure, and monitor progress to ensure we're making the progress on a week over week basis to get us to where we want to go. And if you look at leaders that struggle to do these things, is they lack systems. So what I come with is a framework that we can implement and then a management operating system to wrap around it to ensure those 3 things happen. We're setting the right priorities. We're 10xing the focus there. We're keeping accountable to what we say we're going to do. And then the impact and the performance shows up as a byproduct of that.
Love it. That's great. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of your knowledge with us. This was a really good episode. For people who are listening and they want to reach out to you, how do they find you? Tell us all of the different places where they can go and get your stuff and
Yeah,
out.
absolutely. So my website would be the first place. That's performancemindsetcoaching.co. That's where you'll learn about my methodologies, my approach, what this management operating system looks like, how I can specifically help you 10x your focus. And then also on LinkedIn, feel free to reach out. Let's connect. Let's have a conversation. LinkedIn's where I show up the most, and I'm always trying to give back to the community. And so, yeah, if we connect there, hopefully with the content that I share on a pretty regular basis, adds a significant amount of value to helping you grow and get to that next level.
Well, thank you so much, Aaron. It was lovely to chat with you, and I hope you enjoy your weekend.
Thank you. You too.
And that's a wrap. I want to thank Aaron for sharing his invaluable insights and experiences with us today. Your journey and the strategies you've outlined for adopting a performance mindset are truly enlightening. Thank you. To our listeners, thank you for joining me on this journey of discovery and inspiration. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform and join our community on social media. I would love to hear from you. Leave a review and tell me what topics you'd like me to explore in future episodes. Remember, the future belongs to those who embrace change and innovation with tenacity. Keep striving, keep innovating, and most importantly, stay tenacious in your pursuits. Thank you for tuning in. I look forward to bringing you more inspiring conversations in our upcoming episodes. This is Sonia signing off, but as always, remember to chase your dreams with tenacity.